Good evening, Boston Unity Group. We're back. It's been a couple of months. I hope you're all hearing us great. If you can't hear, or if you can't see, or if we're talking in strange tongues, please let us know immediately so that I can quickly press the buttons and make everything work. It's good to see you all. We have a great presentation tonight that we'll get to in just a moment. First of all, we wanted to just say, if we missed you at PAX, we're sorry. I was hanging around, I was saying hi to everybody, and I may have missed you, and that's my bad. I'm completely blind when it comes to spotting people, I know. But we have started to go back to in-person stuff in general. There is a Boston Indies next month that is going to be in person outside in Cambridge. Let's just hope for good weather. So we're starting to reach a certain amount of normality, although for us this is also normal, so that's fine. A lot of the people on this channel know us only from this, so thanks for coming back and putting up with the terrible bad jokes and high production quality.
I like your jokes, Chris. I think they're exceptional jokes.
They're something. They're definitely something. So before we get started tonight, first of all, if you are interested in the Boston game dev scene and you want to know more about the people here, about any of the games made in Boston, about the history of the groups, you're welcome to join the Boston Game Dev Slack. It is open to join. The address is slack.bostongamedev.com. Thank you, Graham. Yeah, there are 900 and something people on that Slack, although we don't all talk at once, so that's good to know. But it's a good community, and you see job postings on there quite often. Anyone looking for work, if anyone's just wanted to show off some projects they've been working on, it's a good place to be. Do we have any events coming up that we would like to plug or mention outside of the ones that I've already mentioned, which is just one, which is Boston Indies coming up in a couple of weeks?
So there is an official Unity event coming up, which is tomorrow. It's called the what is it called? Dev Blitz Days. So this is a thing that Unity's been doing for a while, where they set aside a day to talk about a specific topic on the forums, and they get a bunch of people from the team to basically do nothing all day except answer forum posts. This one is going to be on performance profiling before they've done authoring, scripting dots in UI. So there's a thread on the forum, which I'll post in chat, which you can go to learn more about this, but it's a great way to ask specific questions if you're wondering, like, oh, is the profiler going to support going backwards, or crazy stuff like that. You can ask in the forums, and you'll get an answer from the people who actually work on the thing. So it's pretty cool. Yep, that's tomorrow. I don't think there's anything else to say about that.
Awesome.
I'm done.
Thank you.
There's a whole bunch of other ones on the meetup/Boston Game Dev site where we're not listed there, even though we're organizers on it for reasons. But there's like an MIT Sloan Gaming Conference coming up the 7th, Queer Game Dev Boston Monthly, the Boston Indies link. And then I think there's also been a call for speakers and for Boston Fig coming up. Was that somewhere?
Yes.
Yes, BFIG I think will be virtual again this year, as I understand it. So if you're interested in presenting or attending, yeah.
Right.
And there's a BPM in-person meetup. We're not sure if it's April 11th or 15th. Okay.
Oh yeah, wasn't it Shiro hosting something at his house too?
I'm still waiting for the invite for everybody to come over to your Vermont estate so that we can camp out. That's like 15 years ago. I'm bringing the whiskey.
Game Dev Summer Camp at Elliot's.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. I don't think there are any more announcements to make.
If anybody has one to add to the chat, feel free.
Yes. Okay, wonderful, awesome. How about that? Okay,
Awesome.
let's hand it over to, first of all, let's introduce our group here tonight. Matt Brelsford's going to introduce the topic. This is all about tiny mass games. Matt's been a member of the community for a very long time, and we know him very well. For those of you who haven't met him yet, Matt, introduce yourself, and please tell us all about your tiny games.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Matt. I'm a game developer. I used to live in Boston for like 7 years. That's where I sort of met everyone. And then I moved out to Western Mass. You should all move out to Western Mass. Southern Vermont is also acceptable because it's pretty close. Yeah, and then do we want to do a round of introductions for the Tiny Mass Games people before I jump in? Yeah, so the Tiny Mass Games is like a much bigger thing than this. The people who are here tonight are the people who finished a game for the first cycle of Tiny Mass Games, and so I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But these are the people who cross the finish line and are therefore awesome. So yeah, why don't we just pass around Ezra? Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ezra. I am a senior at Tufts University, about to graduate. I made a game called Be Honest for the first quarter of Tiny Mass Games, which is a horror personality quiz. I make lots of small games on itch, and currently I'm in sort of a horror arc, experimenting with that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. John.
Hi, I'm John Bellini. I am a game developer, indie developer, music contractor, composer, do it all. But basically, I've been working on my solo project for a couple of years now, 3 years, and then we started this Tiny Mass game a couple of months ago. It's been great working with Shiro. That's about it. Hope to do another one.
Yeah. Great. Well, you are eating right now, so I'll go to Josh and then just to.
Hi, everyone. Josh Kalecki, kind of a hobbyist indie game developer. I made a tiny 4X game inspired by the old classic Majesty for the first cycle of Tiny Mass.
Great. Take us home, Ichiro.
My name's Shiro. I run a studio called Deja Bon. I've been in the industry for about 3 decades at this point, and therefore am closely eligible for the AARP discount on games, which, thanks, Elliot. We are going to release 3 titles this year, and one of them, alongside Space Capsule John Bellini, is Million Monster Militia.
Yeah, right on. Okay, great. So I will talk to you now about Tiny Mass Games. I've got like a really quick presentation that I'll share. This like 5 slides, just to kind of give you some context, and then we'll switch over to kind of a more free-form panel discussion with everyone here. So we are Tiny Mass Games. So this is just what we're going to talk about. We're going to kind of talk about what and why is Tiny Mass Games, and then we're going to talk about sort of the past to give you some context. We're going to talk about the present to tell you where we are right now, and then give you a rough idea of maybe what our future looks like. Before that, so I got this lovely alert. Congratulate Elliot Mitchell for 13 years at Boston Unity Group. So thanks, Elliot. We wouldn't be here without you probably 13 years. Yeah. You're welcome. But yeah, so what is Tiny Mass Games? Tiny Mass Games, so this is my marketing copy. It needs a lot of work, so I'd love feedback on that. But so Tiny Mass Games is a collection of small teams and solo developers from Massachusetts who are creating games with small timelines, focused scope, and big impact. We produce a batch of exciting, unusual, and compelling work once each quarter. And you can view our games here at tinymassgames.com. So what is Tiny Mass Games? The goal really is to release a game every 3 months, and for everyone who's participating to release a game every 3 months. And we break that down into sort of 2 months of development and then 1 month of breathing room. So that sort of 1 month is just for sanity, but also, 2 months is a really aggressive timeline. And, it's at least this time around, I spilled over at least 2 weeks into that third month where I continued development. So this just kind of gives us some wiggle room. One of the sort of important things for me for this, I'll explain sort of why this is a little bit later, but there's kind of no financial entanglement. Like, we are just sort of a loose collective of developers doing our own thing together, right? So there are other groups like Sock Pop who are sort of a big inspiration, but they are very much like a company. They share their finances and they all rely on each other, and there's a lot of trust and stuff like that. And that seems like a really hard thing to pull off, especially in a big community like this. So I wanted it to be very broad and wide open. So there's kind of currently no financial entanglement whatsoever. You make your game, you release your game, we put it in our collection, and that's it. And if you want to make money, that's up to you. Sort of from like a logistical point of view, we meet twice a week. There are sort of 2 weekly meetings. There's a Tuesday at noon meeting and a Thursday at 8 p.m. meeting. Where we kind of treat it like a company staff meeting. We do a stand-up, and then someone gets to set the topic for the day. And then we have a monthly meeting. It's the first Wednesday of every month. Oh boy. I don't know what I meant to put at the end of that, but they're all on Discord. So it's the first Wednesday of every month. Oh, at 8 p.m. That's what that's supposed to say. And so that's next week, right? So if you are interested in hopping on board for the next cycle, which starts on April 1st, a good place to be would be at that Wednesday meeting a week from today at 8 p.m. on the Discord. And if you're interested in getting access to the Discord, message me or post something in the Boston Slack, and I'm happy to give you an invite. We're mostly active on the Discord. That's sort of where our hub is. And then kind of one of the other sort of important pillars of this whole thing is just like really flexible. Everything that I said just now is really sort of open to interpretation. It's really about sort of self-directed goals. Whatever you want to do, whatever you as a developer want to get out of this process is totally fine. One of the people who released a game, Evan, this cycle, had been working on a project for a long time and then decided, you know what, I'm going to use these 3 months to just sort of finish up the game and wrap it up. So, and I think a lot of people are going to take 6 months or much longer to release a thing. So it's wide open. I'm trying to stick to the 3-month thing, but you don't have to. And anyone, I think, can participate. That's sort of an important thing to me. You kind of set your own thing. It's not like you need to be a really skilled developer. And that's kind of goes along with financial entanglement. We don't really rely, like, if you do a bad job, whatever that means, if you don't finish your game, that's totally okay. And I kind of want that sort of spirit. Like, it's a very safe place to just try things out, release things that are maybe weird or not likely to be financially successful or anything like that. And there's people of all skill levels. Yeah. Anything else anyone wants to say about what Tiny Mask Games is? And this is why Tiny Mask Games exists. So first of all, I'm tired of the really long development cycles. 2 years, 3 years is hard. It is really hard. And 2 years, 3 years isn't even like an especially long development cycle. People work on games for 7 years, right? More than that sometimes. And I wouldn't say that I'm sick of it, but I'm tired of it. It is exhausting. And I just really wanted to try out some small things. There's sort of this idea, right, that I don't know what is going to be successful. And I think there are other people out there who have a better idea of, oh, I know if I put 2 years into this type of project with this, theme and these mechanics, it will be successful and it will make a lot of money. I think even the best of those people aren't, probably very accurate. I think it's still a lot of like rolling the dice and sort of gambling and hoping for a hit. And I guess for me, this is sort of a way to roll the dice as many times as possible, right? Like buy as many scratch tickets as possible and hope that one of them hits. And then if they do, then I'll spend 2 years, 3 years developing it into something bigger, right? another thing is I just really wanted to practice finishing games. You know, when you make something for 2 years, 3 years, the amount of times you get to actually release a game is, you know, even if you're really good at it and sort of reliable, is maybe, I don't know, 30 times in your life. And that's not a lot. And so I want to release just a ton of games. I want to do a ton of work and release a ton of things. And then a big part of this is I personally tend to like working as a solo developer. And I think with COVID, right, and the past 3 years, we've all kind of been a little bit isolated. And so I've kind of leaned into that, like, okay, I can't really work with the team very well right now. So I'll work on my own, but boy, I really miss working with people. Boy, I feel isolated. And so I thought it'd be nice if we found a way to kind of work separately, but together. And so we provide moral support, marketing support, meta development support. I don't know what to call this, you know, like playtesting, QA, feedback, brainstorming, all the stuff that you kind of get by working in a company or in a big organization, but without, you know, or at least less conflict, and there's sort of less trust required, right? If we were sort of all financially entangled, if we were all relying on each other for this to make us some money, there's going to be more conflict. We're going to bicker about like, oh, I think that thing you're doing is a really bad idea, and how dare you, right? And if we aren't relying on that, we can kind of be really inclusive. We can sort of let everyone of every skill level and background join us. And yeah, so that's why Tiny Mass Games exists and why it is the way it is currently. So this, just really quick context. So I worked at a company called Fable Vision Studios in Boston, and I made a lot of small games. You know, games with quick turnaround times. So I got really sort of comfortable making small games. In 2017, there's this developer named Adam Vision, I assume his name is Adam, gave this interview, which is linked here, about BitBlaster XL, and he was sort of making a lot of games and releasing them for $2 and made some financial success out of it. So that was inspiring. And then, oh boy, why can I not think of his name? Jake Burkett. Oh, no. Oh, boy. This has gone terribly wrong. Jake Burkett gave a terrible. Jake Burkett gives a talk, you're spending too long making your game. So that was also sort of informative. And then, so because of that, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make a game really fast. So I made Retro Wing Prime in about 3 months, sold maybe 100 copies for $2 a piece. But I really enjoyed the process. I tried to do it again, but kind of got sidetracked by life. And then the missing years of COVID, of course, working on contract stuff, Betty and Earl, which is another project. And then Sockpop in early 2022 released this game called Stacklands. I've been following Sockpop forever. I just love what they're doing. They're basically doing this thing, but they're 4 people, and they're kind of doing this sort of more cohesively. But they released a game that is arguably their first big hit. And that sort of spawned this conversation in the Boston and Pioneer Valley game developer channels. And, you know, I had these big ideas about how I wanted to do something like this, but those sort of dissipated, or I didn't really do anything with that. And then in late 2022, Josh here at Galecki was like, hey, Matt, you should do that thing. I'm gonna start doing that thing. And I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea. Okay. And then here we are, 2023, we started Tiny Mass Games. And here we are today. We've just finished season 1, so quarter 1 was just finished. We completed 5 games. There are at least 61 Discord members. I think there's more since I made this slide deck. That's not everyone who's sort of making games, but that's everyone who's, you know, interested and part of the Discord community. Our games have been streamed by Wanderbots, Jacksepticeye, and Retromation, so like streamers with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, millions in some cases. And our games have been played tens of thousands of times, right? So those to me are really like exciting factoids. I was really pleased with kind of the success that we've had, you know, just 3 months And this is kind of more success than kind of any of my bigger games have ever had. So, that's not really saying all that much, but yeah. And yeah, you can again see our games on tinymashgames.itch.io. Yeah. And then kind of the future, and who knows? Part of what I'm interested in is sort of just letting things happen the way that they want to happen. So organic growth. We're not sort of actively recruiting. We're not going out there. We're here tonight because we like Boston. Many of us like Unity, or at least use Unity regularly. So yeah, organic growth. At some point, once maybe we have a year of games developed, we want to put together what I'm sort of loosely calling the Criterion Collection, which is basically just we kind of all vote on what are the best games, and we put them in sort of a special category to kind of curate things. Maybe someday we'll do a Patreon. I don't know that that's totally right. Maybe someday we'll get some funding. Maybe someday we'll get publishing support. But none of those are really like active goals. They're just sort of maybe things that happen. And then most importantly, season 2, cycle 2 starts on April 1st. So if you are interested in participating, you're super welcome to join us and encouraged, and reach out to me and you'll get an invite to the Discord. Yeah, we'll make a whole bunch of games. So you can learn more about us at our website, tinymashgames.com, which really just redirects to the itch page where you can see the games we've made and a little bit more. On Twitter at tinymashgames. We haven't done a whole lot of sort of like social media or marketing or anything like that. Hopefully that will ramp up over time, but this is where we exist currently. And then these are our panelists, and actually before, so I'll just click through. So this is our itch page. So there's Time Mass Games is sort of a user on itch, and they have this collection of games. And this is the Time Mass Games season 1, right? So Running Riot was Evan's game. Evan's not here. The Only Tower was my game. Million Monster Militia was John and Shiro's game. Josh did Within a Dead City, and Ezra did The Honest. So yeah, and with that, I think that's all that I have to say. I do not understand Google Slides as well as I thought I did. Yeah, so these are your panelists, and now maybe we can just chat. Yeah. Anyone else from Time Mass Games have anything they want to add or say before we move into the discussion part?
I think we're gonna have everybody go through all the developers and like kind of like give like your pitch for your game, and so that we all know what everyone made, and maybe we'll have some follow-up questions for that. Is that, unless
Sure.
anyone wants to add first?
That sounds good. So I guess at the top of our list alphabetically, because by last name would be John, and therefore Shiro, who made Million Monster Militia. You guys want to talk about it?
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. You ready? Yeah. What do you, just talk about the game? Well, basically, Chiro's the sort of the creative director here. This was sort of his vision. He came to me. He was like, "Hey, I'm working on this design, and sort of inspired by some Luck Being Landlord, sort of auto deck builder, Slay the Spire a little bit, and we just sat down and started, banging it out and coming up with a lot of different mechanics and oh wow, you're playing it right now. I didn't see that. So I thought that was a video. Anyways, yeah, so it was a great project. It was a great thing to work on. I think one of the best parts of it was just, well, working with someone else was awesome, because normally I work alone. But I think one of the best things about this project was that it was the scope was so small, and it was like a professional game jam. That's the way I almost look like it. It was like, I love game jams. I've run game jams and stuff, and I've done them. You do it, usually weekend ones. And this was, we worked on this probably 2.5 months or so, maybe a little more because Ichiro had the prototype before. Although I think he did it in a few days, right? I think he only did it in a couple days. But anyways, yeah. So really, the biggest part of this game that was like really simple design, really simple game loop. You're hitting one button basically. You don't really do much. You make decisions, and I think the best part of it is sort of it's like backloaded with lots of processing that happens for each of the different pieces that you pick, and you get synergies. So you have this auto battler. Wait till you get to the point here where you have your militia, you have all these pieces and they get deployed, and all the pieces do different kinds of have different kinds of effects as they attack a boss. And basically what you're trying to do is just kill each boss. There's 10 bosses in this version of the game. And yeah, and we just had a ball, like just making so many different pieces. We ended up making 150 different pieces. I didn't want to do that much. Ichiro's like, more. And I'm like, no, less. And he was probably right, although it was a lot of work. But
I think it didn't. It only made you stronger. Here,
it did make me stronger. Yes.
So like to go broad, the Million Monster Militia is like a deck building solo auto battler where you are able to recruit your army, but once you do, you have no control over what it does. So the recruitment is super important. And I think our goals, briefly, I wanted to work with John. I'd known John for a while. He seemed like a nice guy, and he is a nice guy, even though I give him a hard time all the time.
Yeah.
We also wanted to explore this particular design space. It's a little strategic design with huge piles of synergies, which I think are really going to be important for any game developer doing something in the 2020s. So we released a prototype on itch for free. That was a week and a half ago now, 2 weeks ago almost.
Yeah, about 2 weeks ago.
Since that time, we hit #1 on itch's, like fresh games and, several of the other categories. And we've had over 2 million turns of Million Monster Militia played in that, almost 2 weeks. As John mentioned, that we did I did a bunch of text prototypes in Python before we really started this. So it was a solid concept that was, not like hugely deep or that playable before we came in, but we knew what we were doing before we did the 2.5 months of development.
Yeah.
As John said, we went really, really laser sharp with the focus. So we went deep. And the reason that we picked 150 pieces was so that we could really explore those synergies. And we had, I don't know if folks have played it, but, there are a bunch of pieces that just act, when I say synergies, they act in conjunction with other pieces. So like you place a whale and it spits water out. And I don't know if Trevor is here, but if Trevor is here, he's a piece too, and he turns water into whiskey, which pumps other humans up.
Does he not know yet?
He doesn't know yet.
Yeah. What is Trevor?
What's that? Yeah, Trevor's a piece. Trevor Stricker.
Easter egg.
An Easter egg. Folks had really good ideas when they tested this. John did a really great thing. He put this as a WebGL build up on his site, and people had great ideas. And we said, we ignored everything. We wrote everything down, but we ignored everything outside of the core loop. And that's why I think that we did so well with this game. So our next steps now, it's launched for free on itch, and you can play it. We want to get a little bit of funding for this. And we are going to spend a few more months polishing it up. We're going to bring in some PR and then launch it on early access on Steam on June 17th. So stay tuned.
Awesome. Cool. So I guess we'll go on to me, which is next. So my game is The Only Tower. So The Only Tower is a minimalist action roguelike inspired by Dome Keeper and Vampire Survivors. So the basic idea. So I really wanted to explore sort of deck building roguelikes, just roguelikes in general. I have, there's this, I guess he's a philosophy professor, thinks about games a lot, and he said the sentence that games are an art form whose medium is agency. And that has really sort of dramatically changed the way that I think about making games. I think it's a really smart sentence. And so my theory was, okay, roguelikes are really popular because they give not only the player agency in the game in the way that all games do, but they also, assuming they give you a choice over sort of what power-ups you're choosing, they also give you agency over how the game itself plays, right? So you kind of have this like extra layer of agency. And so I thought, okay, well, how could I take that even further? And so I wanted to make a game where not only were you picking your own power-ups from like a random pool, but you were also picking the enemies that you were going to face and the way that they were upgraded. So I wanted to keep the gameplay really, really simple. For some reason, I don't know if Zoom is eating. Yeah, there we go. So the gameplay is really, really simple. Yeah, we're so proud of you. Basically, you've got this tower at the middle. You're controlling this I character. There's this tower at the middle. Enemies are going to spawn, as you'll see in a second. And then the tower, so I'm not doing anything similar to sort of Vampire Survivors. I'm not doing anything other than go and pick up these little experience points. And I'll just sort of do one round so you can kind of see. Right, so I get to choose my upgrades, because I got enough gems. So I'm going to get a new weapon. We'll get a grenade launcher. And then now, sort of at the end of the wave, I also get to pick the enemies that I'm going to confront. These will be added to all future waves. So I'll get the blob, right? And that's really it. Your goal is to survive as long as possible. There's maybe 11 waves, and then it kind of repeats itself. And it gets really wild. So yeah, I feel really, I felt like this was really, really successful. I got streamed by Wanderbots, who I didn't really know about, but has something like 250,000 subscribers. And so the video got like 1,000 views an hour for a day, which is kind of crazy for me. Yeah, and so I've gotten almost like 100 new followers on itch. One person bought my game for $3, another person bought the game for $8, even though it's free. So that was cool. And there's just like a ton of comments, like just pages of people like theory crafting and like all this stuff. So I felt like this was like a wild success. I don't think I'm going to continue development on this, at least not right now. If someone came along and was like, hey, we'll give you some funding to work on it more, I totally would. But I'm moving on to my next thing, which is a deck building roguelike for my next cycle. So yeah, that's the only tower. You can play it for free on itch right now. And then next we have Within a Dead City by Josh Galecki.
All right, yeah. This is kind of like almost one of those games where I loved this game back when I was a youth, and I hadn't seen anybody do anything with the concept yet. I think this game Majesty was released in 2000 or so. So very old game, but the conceit of the game Majesty was that you were running a fantasy kingdom, but you didn't control your units. You'd have heroes like knights and wizards and whatnot that would go out and they choose their own quests, they fight their own monsters, and you were just kind of running the kingdom and keeping the lights on while you got to see them do that. So Within the Dead City was my kind of like a little bit of a love letter, but also trying to explore that design space of autonomous heroes. So you can see there's a couple of heroes wandering around. They're raiding buildings, fighting monsters. Matt's building a potion shop right now, or something that the heroes can go spend their money at, and then your kingdom gets that money that the heroes spend. So what they do kind of feeds back into the economy. So I had a lot of fun making this. I think one of the most interesting things I found working with Tiny Mass Games or within the schedule is how much more focused you have to be with that deadline and how that kind of benefits the game as well. I think it's easy when you're making a game, especially if you're on your own, you're doing it as a hobby, as I do, you don't have deadlines. So you can say, oh, I've got a great idea to add on to this game. And you can have another great idea after that. And you can keep adding these things on, and your game kind of loses a coherence. It's now 5 different things that it kind of does okay. Whereas with this tightly scoped thing, you have no choice but to just focus on one thing and see where that takes you. So I'm a big fan of this whole project for forcing that focus on you. So this game's done very well for me. I've got some PR people who are interested in helping me move this along. So we're going to kind of explore that. Since this was a short project, I can kind of experiment around with things like that as well. I'll be having a full Steam release of this game over the summertime, sell it for probably $3 or $5 or so, and see how it does.
Cool. Yeah. So then, last but not least, so there's also, there's also Running Riot. Evan's not here, but that's a great game. You should check it out. It's I can't demo it because it costs money and I don't have it currently installed. So, but we have Ezra's wonderful horror quiz, which I didn't even know was a genre, but apparently it totally is, and is a pretty popular one, actually.
Yeah, so be honest, a horror personality quiz. I had made a game that was a horror aptitude test that was just a really quick prototype that didn't have any sound or art or anything. It was just some text, and people really liked that. And I discovered through that process that there was this really niche genre of horror quiz type games, and it seems really strange at first, and I think that's part of the pull. You kind of want to see like why that can work, but you get the pleasure of quizzes where you're like learning about yourself, and you also get this sort of horror in the subtext that's really creepy that I really enjoy in horror games, less so than like I'm not big on jump scares or anything like that. I worked with the Spookfish for the audio. Makes this really great like kind of ambient audio tracks and like weird sounds and backwards speaking and all this stuff. And I used public domain art. All the ads are real ads from like the 60s that are now in the public domain, and I edited some of them. Some of them are just straight up how they were, which is really strange. And just because it's Boston Unity Group, I used Unity and also the Ink plugin, which I love. It's really great for scripting stuff, and it makes it really easy to change the text around, make different paths and storylines and stuff like that. Yeah, since we're sharing statistics and stuff, this game has done way, way better than I expected. It's sitting at like 55,000 plays and 8,000 downloads. Jacksepticeye played it, which was really wild. And I'm trying to get it picked up by a publisher, but who knows about that? But yeah, in terms of Tiny Mass Games, like playtesting was super, super helpful. The support, the deadlines are amazing. Love them. Yeah, that ad is a Kellogg's ad. It's a real Kellogg's ad that ran in newspapers, and that is wild to me. As was Vegetine, the Great Blood Purifier, which is on the screen right now.
Yeah, cool. So a lot of the creepier things start to happen a little bit deeper into, although you see some of it, but I probably won't be able to get to them.
Yeah,
it's great. Definitely play it for yourself. It's an experience. Yeah, so I will just sort of shout out to Evan's game, Running Riot. Oh
Steam
boy,
down.
Is Steam down?
Wild.
Well,
there's a link to the video on the Tiny Mass Games page.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is sort of a twin stick shooter, action roguelike. Really polished, good looking. He, from where it was 3 months ago to where it is now, just like he's done a crazy amount of work on it. It's a lot of fun. So check it out. It's reasonably priced. I think, it's in early access. It's $3. Well worth it in my opinion. This is very loud, so I'm gonna close it. But yeah, so those are the games that were released this cycle. It's not clear yet how many people will make a game. I definitely will make a game this next cycle. And I know a bunch of other people have asked me to sort of like make a forum, which is like where people post. So I know a lot of people are interested. So that's it.
Cool. So we had a couple of questions prepared for the group that I think will help sort of drive discussions. So I think we've touched on some of this already, but it sounds like almost every game was made in Unity. Is that true?
Almost. That is a factual statement.
That's
okay.
almost.
Were there any particular, Ezra, you mentioned ink. I'm just curious, were there any particular plugins or parts of Unity that made this process easier or maybe more difficult? Or just curious to hear your experiences there.
So I used Shapes by Freya Holmer, which is like the best thing. I tend to do a lot of minimal, just 2D flat stuff, and so that plugin was like amazing. Like that really, everything in the game uses just Shapes, so it's all done in the engine. There's some exceptions where I needed like icons for things like that, but almost all the art is done using that. And I actually tweeted at some point, I was like, it's amazing what you can do with just the Shapes plugin. And she, liked and retweeted that. And then I got, 200 likes out of that because everyone follows or should follow Freya. So yeah, that one for sure. Yeah. What about the rest of you?
I used the tile map system of Unity pretty extensively. I've used the tile maps before, and switching to the isometric tiles was fairly easy. That I used for within a dead city.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I used Ink, which for those of you who aren't aware of what it is, it's a narrative scripting language developed by Inkle Studios, and it's open source, and it's lovely, and it plugs into like basically every game engine. They have really good documentation. There are some weirdnesses with it, but they have a forum and everything. Anyway, highly recommend. But the other thing I used was shader graph for the, there's a bunch of effects of like the screen melting and stuff. And that is one ungodly shader graph with just a ton of nodes. And it is just a material on a thing that the camera looks at, and that's how that works. So
I saw Chris's face, but remember, it's like 2-month thing. So like you only have really time to just do one horribly ugly mess of a thing, right? So like kudos to Ezra.
It works.
I'm sure we've all committed more heinous crimes against game development than that.
Well, it works, and it's extremely effective. It's just the subtle things you do with the text on that game. It freaks me out. It's like, did those words change? Did I read that right? Am I imagining that painting? It's really good.
And it's reminiscent of when Requiem for a Dream had their website when they launched like forever ago. Mm-hmm. It would like glitch out like that and things. It was reminding me of that.
One of the things I keep saying in our meetings is like, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. Because like with such a short turnaround, like you just have to take all the shortcuts. Everything's a singleton. Who cares about proper architecture? Like just get it done. And like, again, you're going to be done with this thing in 2 or 3 months. Like you don't need to worry about future you at all. Until you get a publisher who's like, hey, yeah, turn this into a big thing, and then you're screwed. But lots of shortcuts.
That's one way to guarantee your success. Guarantee your success by making your code an ungodly mess, so that when you get a publisher because of it, you'll have to come back and.
So I've done it wrong. I've architected capital A stuff too early many times, and I think it has actually the right way to do it ugly if you're doing something in 2 months, and we shouldn't be we shouldn't be at all embarrassed about it. That's what refactoring is for, right? You've learned a whole bunch of stuff that you simply couldn't have anticipated initially, so doing it the capital R, I like capitals today, right way initially we'll just like lock. I think I advised Ezra's team at Tufts to not architect stuff. I don't know how much they listen to me or not, but like you can end up preventing yourself from making some interesting design explorations by doing that. And so that's why we did the prototype for Million Monster before we actually, explored.
Yeah, for sure. You have to do stuff wrong a little bit, and then when you're repeating yourself or doing the same thing over, like, okay, wait a second. I mean, and you don't have time really. I mean, I did do some architecture stuff. I had to because we did so many pieces, but there's a lot of duct tape involved.
Yeah, and I think a lot of architecture, like in games, is really about supporting a lot of people working in the same thing, or supporting level designers or content creators. And in this case, the teams are so small that a lot of that stuff isn't really that important at all. So yeah, you just forget all that and just go for it. It's kind of refreshing to work that way, actually.
Sort of segues into my next question, which was how do you prevent scope from getting out of control? Like, how do you tamp that down and make sure you're focusing on making a thing that you can complete in the time frame you have?
You have Ichiro on your team who just ignores everyone,
who's done it wrong so many times that he has a second sense. I think that keeping something single dimensional was really good for us. So we had a deep roster of pieces. We have 150. John heroically into the Friday evening. I remember he's like, "Oh, we need pieces by Friday," and I was sitting at the spreadsheet just like churning stuff out in text, and then John was turning that into actual working code. And the first time it doesn't work right because there are weird edge cases. But the fact that we didn't try to add an item system, inventory system, we didn't try to do anything that was kind of like orthogonal to those 150 pieces really allowed us to focus. And we left a lot on the table as a result, but that's something that we can explore. And therefore I would say, like, the philosophy that you can always add dimensionality later is kind of comforting and also adds to discipline.
Yeah, I think kind of the way I approach it is like do the smallest. Like I remember brainstorming, I was like, how can I make this just as small as possible before I got started, but where I can explore this one thing that I'm interested in, which is like picking the enemy upgrades. And then I did that, and it is so easy to add new features. I think there's this temptation to be like, oh, I've got to have this great idea with all these like mechanics and concepts before I get started. But I think that that's sort of a mistake. And then every time I was thinking about adding a feature, it was like, okay, is this in support of this one thing that I'm trying to explore? And if it's not, I'm just not going to do it. But even with all of that, I added too many things. I took too much time doing X, Y, Z. The other sort of really important thing was just like getting a game that was done within like the first week, like a game that you could play from start to finish with a title screen and win screen just as soon as possible, so that I could always just release it whenever. That was really helpful.
For myself, one thing that helped was create a design document saying like week 1, 2, 3, 4, what am I going to do? Save the last 4 weeks for like content and sound and all that. So that was very helpful. But then I also kind of abandoned the direction the design document was going 3 or 4 weeks in, because I said, well, here's what I have. Where is that going? Instead of when I had nothing, where was that going?
Interesting. Yeah, so it's an interesting set of like constraints. Are there certain game genres or certain game mechanics that are better suited to this sort of format?
That's one of the things that we're at least I'm hoping to find out. I have some suspicions, right? But I would have said like, a 4X game, grand strategy game, totally off the table. But of course, Josh made a small version of a 4X game, and it's great. So I'm probably wrong about a lot of my assumptions. I think my current thinking is roguelikes are great because they have sort of built-in longevity and replayability. Arcade games are really sort of easy to develop, right? You don't really need to have a satisfying ending. It's just get a high score, just sort of infinitely just play for as long as you can. Yeah, that's, I guess, all I've got figured out.
Well, I
so
think
far.
Games with a lot of content, like visual novels, which Ezra somehow made happen, are the worst. I mean, we failed. Like we were doing 2 projects, and one had to fall off the radar for like a few reasons. But I would love to hear how Ezra managed to get an entire VN done and do school, and I think he has like 3 other projects.
Well, I was actually gonna say like that it was pretty easy for Be Honest because like there's basically no design work. Like it's narrative design, but there's not really like any game mechanics in the game. Like it's basically I had all my UI because I just looked at like how Myers-Briggs does their like multiple choice questions, and then I had like this prototype of a horror game from before, and I pretty much knew that I could do that in X number of questions. So I mean, it's just a question of doing a small version of it. Like there's almost no branches in it. There's a couple of little fun things that like if you don't answer any of the questions, then it like tells you that you're spoil sport. But there just not much content and not anything that can break.
Yeah, I think none of us made a game where there were like levels that you needed to design. I think that kind of content I do think takes forever. So anything that takes a lot of time like that is.
Yeah. Also, the difficulty curves in a lot of the games are just really hard. So that's kind of that was sort of our design, was like just make it really, really, really hard, and then that's part of it. But you don't want to make it boring either. So I think all the games have an interesting ramp, and we learned so much from watching people play it. I couldn't believe. I mean, Matt's game. I saw someone play your game, man. I was like, wow. Like I would never have been able to play it like that.
Yeah, no, it's of course one of those things where people play it and people posted videos where they've got like 1 million, they've gone, forever. And I just, wasn't anticipating. I thought I made it too hard. Right. But I do think like balancing was really, really hard. And that's one of the things I want to do a better job of next time with a roguelike, like, which I don't think is especially like balance bound. It was still really, really hard. I didn't spend nearly enough time playtesting and balancing as I probably should have.
I mean, Evan's not here, but Running Riot seems like it has levels. I couldn't get very far.
They're kind of all arenas, and so there's maybe a handful of arenas, kind of like Hades, if you played that, where my guess is the total amount of levels is relatively small, and then they're kind of stitched together. But I was shocked with how much work he did. So like, he did a lot of work, and I don't know how. So, yeah.
Did Shiro or John, you ever play through your entire game? All the states?
I have not won our game.
Yeah, I was able to win. You weren't able to win it.
I wasn't. I have not gotten to the end. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and that's sort of like where we're at right now, where some people have figured out how to bust the game and win. There's certainly different ways to do it, and I saw that earlier on. I was like, oh, no one's gonna find this, and that was ridiculous. Everyone found ways to win, and people found a lot of different ways, so that was really fun. But that's on the docket. Like, how do we control that? Because there are certain pieces, that these exponential pieces, that just grow and grow, and it's like we were kind of thinking, what do we do with them? And the answer was really nothing. Just let them do it, and then we'll address it later, because we couldn't do anything in that time frame. It was too soon. There wasn't enough time to really address that, because once you address it, it opens up a whole. So that's the whole issue with a tiny mass game, and it's such a short deadline, is that you have to just always say no, because once you say yes, then the yes turns into, well, what about this now? What about this? And then it just cascades. Yeah. So you have to stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Which is good, which is a good practice, I think.
Mhm.
And I don't think players might, they didn't get mad. They weren't, some people, like when at first we had 50 bosses and we are like, okay, wait, that's just too many. And then we were like, okay, just to be sort of controlled on the itch release, we did 10 bosses. And when I took away those, I had a couple people complain like, oh, I really like the 50. I'm like, well, we didn't really, they weren't mad, but they were like, oh, I like it better, and we can't wait to see what you do with that. So,
it's in a similar. I was surprised with how attached people were, how invested. Like people were posting like theory crafting, like, oh, this is the best build. I don't like this, and just were way more invested than I ever sort of expected for a free web.
From build to build.
Yeah, well, like, if you get the shotgun with the grenade launcher and the thumper, like that's the best. And then people are like, oh no, those are OP or whatever, so yeah.
That's awesome.
Chris or Elliot, do you have any? Oh, sorry, Ezra.
I was just going to say, somebody emailed me asking what the lore of Be Honest, which I was very happy.
What is the lore of Be Honest?
I can't tell you.
Oh.
I gave them a bunch of hints.
Good question. Or good answer.
That's fabulous. I don't have any questions. I enjoyed playing them all. It's impressive how diverse this first batch are. I found that was kind of refreshing. The variety. Do you see because you've obviously got more people interested in making more games already, and I understand you've got some more underway at the moment. Are you still seeing like a lot of variety between each of the developers?
Yeah, I think everyone's got a different idea about what they want to make, and sort of the beauty of Time Mass Games is it's so short, and that taking a risk on sort of atypical genre or something you're not super comfortable with is really much more approachable, right? Or so I think a ton of variety. We'll see.
Yeah, I think also there was some people this cycle that didn't finish, and I think they kind of felt bad about that, but yeah. I don't think that was really, I think they shouldn't have felt bad. They tried something. If it didn't work, it didn't work.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I think it's inevitable, right? You set out to do a thing, you set a goal for yourself, and you don't hit it. Like we tell ourselves that we failed and that we're bad because we failed. But I kind of, for me, a lot of this is like, okay, I want to, I want to find a way to make my whole career out of making these small games. And there's probably 99% of the ways that I'm going to try are going to be terrible ideas. And so I want to try them all and just fail. And so like failing and kind of watching other people fail actually is really, really helpful. And so I hope that all of us, who are sort of participating get to watch other people quote unquote fail or just not hit their goals and sort of like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't try and learn a new engine if I'm gonna, make something in 3 months, right? Or maybe I'm not gonna try and make a game with a lot of levels or something like that. Or I'm gonna do what
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember me and Matt talking about how we were going to try to do a lot of experimenting with Tiny Mass with this first cycle. Be like, oh, I want to try out maybe a new engine in a drastic sense, or I want to try out incorporating this or using this asset. And then we also realized like, oh, we don't have time to experiment with this as well. So I think there's definitely a kind of trade-off you have to do between working within something you know how to do and definitely keeping the scope tight as well. I think that's a skill that is hard to learn, is how to keep the scope small enough that you can do a full game in 2 months.
Yeah, and I think there's something nice, right? Like there's that, I forget who coined it, but most advanced yet acceptable is like this like marketing, I think, thing or design thing where you kind of want to do something that everyone's really familiar with, but only it like change one little thing, just push the genre just a little bit further. And I think for me, I'm so tempted when I make a game, like, oh, I'm going to do everything different. I've got all these great ideas. I'm going to throw them together. And then you just get this sort of thing that nobody understands. But when you make something really small and focused and you just change the one thing, right? Like for me, it's the enemy upgrades. Then it's sort of like people understand most of it. And then that one little thing is the interesting bit. So I think it kind of forces you to be a good product designer in a way. Although there are all these limitations and challenges too.
Yeah, on the point of variety too, we tried doing like a theme, and Josh stuck valiantly to the theme and the color palette, but a lot of us just kind of went in other directions, and partially because we kind of had ideas going into it. But I think that's something that was sort of different. We might have expected it to be more like a game jam where we're all working around a theme, but it ended up being that most of the things that were useful were like supporting each other and stuff, and not necessarily having the same theme.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot about the theme, which was Rebirth, by the way, because we knew we were going to release around springtime. So we thought Rebirth. And mine kind of has some of that. Like I thought about being like in a body, sort of, and maybe this thing is like an egg. But yeah.
I really only kept the color palette. The theme was abandoned along with that first design document.
Yeah, I was gonna mention it is kind of reminiscent from the outside of like an extended game jam, and we've all like done game jams where people try out a new engine or build their own engine or something crazy like that. So there's definitely like, has everyone who worked on this like had a familiarity with the tools they were using, and like as a reason why you use them, like.
Yeah, I mean, so like I prototyped in text in Python because I just like my brain works really well with that. And then I don't know why we're invited to join with the Boston Unity group since neither of us did. And then John knows construct in and out, and therefore he just like, I mean, like that we chose those tools despite the fact that they don't have some of the bells and whistles that Unity does. I think it worked well for us.
Yeah, I think, we talked about we did do some stuff in Unity. We did the art.
Oh, that's right. Actually, the art, the beautiful art, is all from the assets store. I basically set up a system in Unity to record like low res 1990s era sprites in like six frames so that they're like animated. Yeah. Brilliant. And that whole thing was done in Unity, spat out as screenshots, processed using Pillow in Python, and then over to John in Construct. So yeah, I guess we did use Unity.
Yeah, we did. We definitely did some interoperability there. We and Shiro wanted to get it down to he had it as 3 button presses, and he said this is unacceptable. It needs to be 1 button press.
Well, the it is, yeah. So it processes and animates all of them. You hit play, and an editor script runs, and Unity's a great support tool. How about that?
Nice.
Yeah, no, I know Construct really well. I mean, I have taught Unity, and I hadn't been in Unity in a couple of years, and I just was like, I don't know. I just was like, I want to do something I'm really, really comfortable with. I could have done it in Unity. It would have been more painful, and I didn't want any pain. There was enough pain already. So I didn't want to argue it I didn't want to fight the development tool. But also, like, I mean, more than that, I think Matt said this before, you don't often get to, I mean, how many times in your life do you get to finish a game? I mean, we're not all at Shiro, who has like 1 million games under his belt, but
remember, I'm getting the AARP discount.
Yes, right,
too,
right.
So.
You're so old. But like, from the art world, iteration and not bike shedding, but wood shedding, doing something over and over again. And if you can do a small game like a game jam, but this is in a little more professional setting, just being able to get to this point every single time, you just get better and better at it. So that's why I think it's so powerful. But yeah.
Yeah, and so I use Unity. I'm super comfortable with Unity, so that's definitely why I went with it. But I also have like a starter kit that kind of like has, you know, a title screen and a pretty extensive settings screen and a million sort of transitions and effects and stuff like that. So I've got like a really good starting point. And so my suspicion is that I'm going to build that up over the course of this Tiny Mouse Games thing, and then I'll be able to just really sort of crank out and just focus on gameplay and stuff like that. Yeah.
Is that something that you put together yourself, or is that something you found and sort of built on top of? Okay.
Yep, something myself. Yeah, not long after I made Retro Wing, which is sort of the first one of these years, and 5 years ago, I started making this thing, and then I've kind of just added to it. And honestly, the settings screen took me months to develop, and so just lots of UI with like nested layout groups and variable font sizes and all kinds of things. I
was gonna make a joke about that, but
and now there's like the new UI elements or whatever, which I'm like is gonna be way better, and I should have just built it with that. But we'll see.
UI toolkit stuff.
Yeah.
So I have 2 questions if we want to close out with those. The first one is kind of fun. If you had to do one thing differently about your development process or your game or any part of this, what would you do different and why?
Well, I guess I'll go, and I spend a lot of time on a boss fight, which I felt like I just need to have because games have boss fights, and I think it's a beautiful thing. But like, so I made this thing and got about halfway done and spent maybe 2 weeks on it and realized like, I'm going to need to spend another 2 weeks. I don't have time for that. So I kind of basically just put it in as like, so it's still technically in the game and you can see it and it looks really cool. So it's like a set piece moment, but I didn't, cut out 75% of the functionality, so I didn't have to add sound effects and stuff like that. And then maybe hire someone to do audio next time. Audio takes me forever. So that's 2 things. But I wonder what else other people.
Audio took me a full week of time, and I have like the most generic fantasy sound effects ever. Like, there's a lot of good libraries out there for that. I think my development went pretty smoothly, actually. I think I wish I would have. I was doing systems development till week 6, and I wish I stopped at week 4 or so. I felt like I was trying to run too late in the game there, but pretty smoothly overall.
Did we do anything wrong? I feel like this has been the smoothest project of this size. I mean, we've done a bunch before that have.
The only thing I can think of, I mean, the only thing I would say, the art it felt a little bit out of my control.
Oh my God.
The art. So
You're
like one of the
shitty 90s art.
No. So one of the things that I did, and because this is my process, the way I work, I have to like see something look decent a little bit and get it up and running. So then I know it works, because it's really hard. Like, I know like programmer art, it's just like do boxes, do beeps and bloops or whatever. But like there's a part of me, I don't know, maybe it's just, I don't know, my way my brain works. I need to kind of see it like a first pass done to things. And so a bunch, like Shiro was just like, I don't care, just make a box. And he first had these like circles, and it had like the unit name. I'm like, I can't see it. It's supposed to be a man-eating plant, and it was a circle. And I'm like, I can't do it. I can't imagine what that would be like. And I don't know why, I just hated it. So I had to go, and I like made I like went to SketchUp, and I like positioned like a 3D model, and then I like screen capped it, and then I brought it into Sprite, which is a pixel art editor, and then I traced it, and I made a bunch of frames, and I did some stuff to it, and then I like brought it in. I spent way too much time doing that. I eventually I stopped it all together, but that's really hard for me to work with. No, and that's just like where I come from. It's really, really hard for me to not polish as I go, because that's what I learned as a composer. As you just polish as you go, and then when you're done, when the time runs out, you're done. You don't get to a point and go, okay, now I'm going to polish. I do that as well, but at that point it's like too late to polish because like I don't know. So I'm a huge believer in polish as you go. So that the art part was the only thing that I don't know what we could have done differently because there was so many pieces. It wasn't something I could make myself. So short of hiring or having another member on our team that did art fully.
I think John's right. Immediately it looked better when we got the art in, and so I got the idea eventually. I'm like, oh, I see what you're saying. You're doing all these pieces, and then I went in and I'm like, okay, let me get off my butt and just put place. Yeah. They're always going to be placeholders. The game's fugly, but like they're even more placeholdery. But I think they were okay because they differentiated things, and that like. I don't know. I mean, we communicated on that, and I felt like that was to good effect.
Yeah. And I think it's okay for things to be fugly, so to speak, as long as they're consistent, right? Like everything in your game looks like it belongs, and so even though Vampire Survivors, for example, like it's a fugly game, but it's consistent.
Yeah, and also like the whole like sort of feel and theme of the game. Like I remember at one point we just put a stupid trailer together. And I was trying to like, what's the personality of this game? And then I had like all these like, we had this one piece just like ferrets, and we had these little rats, and I had this little sound effect for them, like little chirping sound. And it was a little different variation. And then I filled up the whole grid with all of them, and then they like attacked the boss, and it was hilarious. And it's just something about that and seeing the little tiny things in it, they weren't just squares, it helped sort of sell the personality of the game. So it helps me. So I don't know. I think it's good.
I think my development went pretty smoothly as well. I think to some extent we're seeing like that diagram of like an airplane with like all missing the engine, right? With survivorship bias. These are all the people who finished, so we all went pretty smoothly. But I guess one thing for me, I'm like way on the end of, we were talking about like cheating earlier, and I make a lot of small games, and this is like more polished for me than usual, so I go way towards like just having everything be total crap. And I wish that I had spent a little bit more time like working on like the settings and the kind of stuff that Matt has in his package. We mentioned that Jeff Campbell made this Unity starter package, and I really wanted to try to use it. I was struggling with GitHub, and I was like, I'm not going to do it for this one. So I wish I had done that at the beginning, but otherwise went pretty smoothly.
Awesome. All right, so final question. It's kind of a softball. So the next round is happening on April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to get involved with this or learn more about getting involved, what's the process there, and like who's eligible, and who do they talk to?
Yeah, so you could really talk to any of us if you know where to find us. Probably the easiest way is just on the Boston Slack, which if you're not there, you should probably be there anyways. It's a great place to be. But if you're not there and you don't want to be there, or you can't figure out how to get there, you can also message me on Twitter at tinymassgames, all one word. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, everyone's eligible. It is called Tiny Mass Games, which is sort of supposed to be about, both the size of the thing and also the state of Massachusetts. But I left it kind of vague, right? It's not Tiny Massachusetts Games specifically for Elliot. No, but like really, I want this to potentially over time become a much bigger and broader thing, and build a brand or whatever nonsense word. So yeah, everyone's welcome. All skill levels. Message me or anyone here, and we'll set you up.
Excellent. I think the name is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
So,
if you think of Massachusetts in like the 1600s or different eras, it encompassed different.
That's true.
That's true.
Maine was part of Massachusetts.
I think, though, we now have someone from Oregon who I don't think Massachusetts ever encompassed Oregon, but
Yet.
Yes. Okay.
Shiro and I are on the same wavelength. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining us. This was amazing.
Yes, thank you for hosting.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
All right.
So I just want to give a shout out to every game had really cool audio that wasn't really featured in the stuff. We focus on art and stuff, but I was really enjoying a lot of the audio too. So shout out to paying attention to that detail that gets overlooked a lot in games.
There's a late question here, but it's a really good one. I think it's Amanda Williams is asking, why was it not called Quartermass?
Oh, because the arcade. I mean, there's an arcade pun right there as well.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good. See, it's quarterly.
Well, I figure at some point when we do bigger games, it'll be big mass games.
Big mass games. I'm
big mass. We
all sort of merge together like Voltron and just produce the big game.
Oh,
will we not become half mass?
Half mass.
Critical mass.
Critical mass. Where were you all like 4 months ago?
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, geez.
I love it. The chat has blown up with it. Like, this is the most active the chat has been all talk.
Things, yeah.
Critical mass. I love critical mass.
Yeah.
We'll,
Don't know.
we'll write reviews. Critical mass.
There you go.
Whoa. The review branch.
Okay. All right. Well. Yeah, no, they're good. They're getting good. They're good. Okay, thanks, chat. Thank you, our panel, for all of your presentations tonight, and thanks for the games. I love playing games, and these were great. I spent way too long this afternoon playing all of them. Yeah, we'll be back next month. I believe we have a presentation lined up. Details to follow. And yes, we have had interest in UI Toolkit Talk from potentially from Unity. We'll find out more about that and let you know. Yeah, and we'll see you all next month.